Hello and welcome to Fighting Through Writing, your guided tour amongst the gilded towers of competitive fiction writing. My name is Paul. I'm a copywriter by day, a competitive fiction writer by night, and if you watched my last video, you'll know that I'm on a mission to write the story that can help me become the undisputed champion of professional wrestling. Before we kick that story off though, I thought I'd start by giving us a little introduction into our protagonist, the man through whom we're hoping to make that dream a reality. A man by the name of El Pablo. So, El Pablo is a member of a famous Mexican wrestling dynasty known as La Familia Volando. La Familia Volando first came to prominence in the early part of the 20th century thanks to Pablo's great-grandfather, Señor Volando, a man who is best known for two things. One, for suplexing a live bear during an exhibition match for part of the Cinco de Mayo celebrations in Puebla City, Mexico. Some naysayers actually say it was a man in a costume, but they don't know what they're talking about. They're lying, okay? And if you hear that, two, for his fascination with chaos theory, aka the butterfly effect, this idea that small changes in the initial circumstances or of a system or sequence can lead to wildly different outcomes further down the line, which he channels into developing a wrestling philosophy based around fighting in the moment, relying on instinct and improvisation as opposed to rigid tactics and strategies. These teachings are later carried on by his son, Señor Volando Jr., who establishes the family's La Mazmorra Volando Training Academy, and then in turn by his own sons, Chico, Villano, and Harry. Of those three, Chico finds by far the most success. He is able to fully cross over into the American professional wrestling scene as the Flying Kid, and this always irks Villano, who feels like his own admittedly slightly less wholesomely acquired successes back in Mexico are overshadowed. Once the brothers all start having children, these feelings of resentment are then amplified further by paranoia that Villano's own children are going to find their careers and their successes suffering the same fate, being overshadowed by the accomplishments of Chico's children. And it gets to the point where he actually challenges Chico to a match where the winner will become the official custodian of the Volando family. With a little bit of manipulation and some help from Harry, Villano wins and immediately decrees that as long as he sits upon that throne, no son of Chico's will ever be able to compete under the Volando family name. Obviously, this is devastating to Chico, who now, fearful for his son's safety, elects to retire from competition, really at the peak of his powers, just to try and raise and train them away from Villano's influence. Unbeknownst to the rest of his family, however, Chico has a secret that, if it were to be exposed, would ruin his reputation and really that of the Volando family as a whole. And when someone starts threatening to do just that, Chico decides that he needs to start competing again, partly for financial reasons, to kind of shore up the finances should the worst happen, but also to try and just keep this persona of himself as a wholesome family man kind of at the forefront of people's minds. As he leaves, he takes the tough decision to entrust his son's training to Villano, despite everything that Villano has promised, pleading with him that even if they don't compete under the family name, they can still serve to benefit the family as a whole. And Viano surprisingly agrees, but it quickly becomes apparent that he has got no interest in training Chico's sons for competition. In fact, so brutal is the treatment that he inflicts upon them that it's obvious that he wants to try and scare them out of getting into a wrestling ring full stop, never mind following in the footsteps of all the Valandos that have gone before them. Despite Viano's best efforts, though, both Pablo and his brother persevere, and Pablo actually manages to parlay that experience into a career on the ultra-violent underground circuit in the United States, albeit as El Pablo rather than Pablo Valando. Now, just as an aside, the name El Pablo is an alter ego that I think I came up with when I was like 10, 11, and I'm not really sure why. I certainly don't have any family ties to Mexico or even Spain or anything like that, but I always was kind of drawn to them. Like whenever I'd watch a football tournament and if England weren't playing or inevitably got knocked out, I would always kind of gravitate to Mexico or Spain as a second team. I've always been really fascinated by Mesoamerican culture and Aztecs and the Incas and the Mayans and all that sort of thing as well. So I don't know, something in there obviously just sparked inspiration in me, I suppose. And yes, I'm aware that the name means the pool, but I was 11 and it sounded pretty cool. So here we are. Anyway, when he first starts out, it's clear that Pablo's understandably suffering from a real identity crisis. Like he's having to learn how to not be this thing that he's been raised to be ever since he was born. So he's very generic, he's very bland, he's very, gosh, I'm so glad to be here. Basically the worst version of John Cena. However, with the help of good friends he makes like Ace King and Ruthless Aggression, he slowly starts to embrace aspects of his heritage, becomes a bit more impulsive and kind of begins to trust those teachings that his great-grandfather first put together all those years ago. And ultimately his mission becomes to create such a buzz around him and to garner so much attention that Viano has to cash in and has to bring him into the fold and let him be a part of the Valando family. So, as I say, his demeanor and his attire becomes more vibrant. He becomes more outspoken. He starts doing more wild kind of madcap stunts, both in the ring and outside of it. He gets a sponsorship deal with Skittles that he brings up all the time. He stars in B movies like Over the Rainbow with Steven Seagal and A Fistful of Skittles with Mark Paul Gosselaar, I think is how you pronounce it. Zach from Saved by the Bell. Most importantly, he keeps winning. He makes his way up through the ranks. He finally breaks into the mainstream and he becomes a multi-time champion on an international stage. And then it happens. He gets an invitation from Viano to join him at La Mazmorra Valando. Finally, he thinks, all his hard work has paid off. He's finally going to be allowed to join the family, to become part of that legacy. But obviously, it's a trap. Upon arriving at La Mazmorra, Pablo is set upon, he's ambushed, and he's assaulted by all the associated members of the Valando family. Basically, that scene from Game of Thrones where the entire Night's Watch gang up and murder Jon Snow. under cover of darkness, he's then taken out into the desert by Villano. He's buried in a ditch and he's basically left for dead. But again, just like he did before, somehow Pablo survives. But while he may be alive, it's clear that he is further than he has ever been from making that dream of his a reality. Just when everything seems at its darkest, though, he gets a call in late 2017 from Ace King inviting Pablo to join him and Ruthless Aggression at the Extreme Wrestling Corporation. Basically the biggest, the most prestigious and the most commercially successful wrestling company in the world. And it is here that we still find ourselves today. Now, in terms of Pablo's EWC career, it's been pretty good. He's a 3-time tag team champion. He's a former indie champion. He's a former North American champion. He is the current international champion, as well as being tag team champion with his brother Vertigo in a team called the Silent Discotechnicos. And he's also a former X Division champion, where he not only set the record for the longest reign with that belt in the company's history, it's also the second longest reign of any championship in the entire company. But despite all of the success that he's had, there's always this strange dichotomy where, despite all of his success, it all has this kind of hollowness to it, because it's not Pablo Villando that's won these things, it's El Pablo. And really the thing he wants most is that acceptance into the Villando family. It's getting that approval from Villano, despite everything that Villano did to him, and being a part of that Villando family legacy. But there's still one thing that in Pablo's mind he believes will make his viability as a Villando undeniable, and that is to become the undisputed champion, to win the very biggest prize in professional wrestling. If he wins that, then even Villano's ego surely won't let him not be associated with that. So that is what is really driving Pablo at this point. He's already had many opportunities to try and win that belt and has always come up short, but he keeps going because that's all he's ever done. That's all he knows how to do. And it's the only thing in his mind that can help him be a part of that legacy. So that is the man. That is the plan. Now let's see if we can make it a reality. Now, for production and scheduling reasons, I actually filmed this next part of the video before this one. And in watching it back, I realized that this guy doesn't perform quite as well when just resting on the desk in front of me. So if the sound's not quite as great, that's why, and I'm sorry. I did consider going back and refilming it, or just kind of scrapping it entirely and starting from the next one, but this is as much about my process of learning this side of things as it is my process as a writer. So yeah, it's just another artifact and another thing we can look back on and see how far we've come. Okay, it is Tuesday, and as promised, we officially have our first assignment of the season, our first step on the road to trying to become the undisputed champion. And goodness me, is it a big one. So before we get into properly planning and writing out the story, I thought I'd give you all a bit of a brief overview of where this is all taking place and just try and give you a vague idea of kind of how it all works and give you a bit of context. So this is the EWC, aka the Extreme Wrestling Corporation. It's been going since 1997, which is insane because I didn't even know the internet existed in 1997. Now, the way it works is within the overall Extreme Wrestling Corporation, there are multiple brands. You've got Monday Night Brawl, Friday Night Rampage, Paramount Wrestling, and Prime. Now, each brand has its own distinct roster of wrestlers. They have their own unique championships and their own storylines and shows that play out on each of them individually, but they also contribute within the company as a whole. So there are championships, obviously, like the Undisputed Championship, like the tag team titles that can be defended, can be won by members of any of these rosters. So El Pablo currently is signed to Monday Night Brawl. However, this show that we are going to be writing for takes place on Prime. Prime is where I first started, and it's what is known as a micro-fed. The unique thing with Prime is that every promo you write, every story, every piece of work that you put together can be no more than 750 words, which, believe me, if you're trying to write a wrestling promo, is pretty challenging. So this is the card, this is the rundown for the show that is taking place. Episode 132, February the 16th, 2025, Clash at the Coliseum 3. And here, straight away, opening the show, we have our first match. It is the Heat Packers versus the Silent Discotechnicos in a Mile of Broken Glass match for the EWC Tag Team Championships. You can see there's a little rundown there, but I will give you that now. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same, don't they? Last year on our season premiere, the Heat Packers challenged the Silent Discotechnicos for their tag team titles. So we thought, geez, why not do the exact same match again? Not. Packers came out on top in 2024's match, but they're going to have to up the ante to take the belts off Pablo and Vertigo this time around, because it's going to be what we're affectionately calling a Mile of Broken Glass. What is that? Well, picture a thick cable dipped in glue and then dipped again in broken glass, and then one member of each team connected to one of their competitors. There, that should be enough to mix things up. So that sounds lovely. So, as the write-up there suggests, this is actually a rematch of the opener that we did last season, where I lost the tag titles to the Heat Packers. So, in terms of how to approach writing the promo for this, with it being a team that I've faced before, that Pablo and Vertigo have faced before, you've obviously got a little bit of prior stuff to go back on and work on. You've got the obvious motivation of wanting to make amends for what happened and wanting to avenge that loss and make sure that you can keep the titles this time. I'm also immediately, with the Mile of Broken Glass thing, kind of thinking of, the idea of walking a mile in my shoes or in our shoes, and how we can play off of Pablo and Vertigo's upbringing and the hardships that they endured under their Uncle Viano as kind of a, this is nothing to us. We've been through all this kind of stuff before. Now, in terms of who wins and how you win, there's an official scorecard that each of these promos is going to be graded against, which maybe I'll show you at a later date, but I don't want to give away the special sauce, But equally, I feel like writing purely to suit the scorecard, I think it limits you, and it can it makes every story sort of feel like a box ticking exercise, and maybe makes things not really flow too naturally, like you're just kind of shoehorning details in. The main thing that I always try to consider when I'm writing a story is, who are you fighting? Where are you fighting? When are you fighting? If this was a real show with real tickets on offer, then your job as a wrestler is to talk people into the building, to make this match seem like something that these people are going to want to pay their hard-earned money to come and see. So who, where and when. There's also, why is this match significant for your competitor? Like, what does it mean to them to compete in it, full stop? What would it mean for them to get the win? And then obviously the other one is, how are you going to win? So what's your strategy? And more importantly, what's the difference? What's the key thing, or the key things that are going to mean that it's the silent Discotechnicos that win this match rather than the Heat Packers? That can be anything from, the style of wrestling, it being something that your opponent doesn't necessarily traditionally do too well against, or equally their style be something that you traditionally have done quite well against. It can be things like maybe someone's on a bad run of form, maybe someone hasn't necessarily competed at this level before, or maybe they're just coming back from an injury, something like that. So if we can factor in all of, or most of those things, given in mind that there's only 750 words to work with, then that, generally speaking, should tick off pretty much everything in terms of the scorecard, and in terms of giving you the best chance of convincing the judges that yours is the story that should get the win here. But let's take a little look at this. So this is my record keeping Bible, I suppose. So from a statistical point of view, I've always got something to try and build a narrative around and kind of frame my argument around for why I should win. So here we've got all the tag teams from 2024, and as you can see, the silent Discotechnicos are Pablo and Vertigo, 2024 Tag Team of the Year, right there at the top of the tree. And you've got the Heat Packers, our opponents, just down here in number 6. So immediately you're looking at number of fights last season. Discotechnicos had 9, Heat Packers had 4. Discotechnicos won 8, Heat Packers won 3. They both lost 1 apiece, but significantly, the one that the Discotechnicos lost was to the Heat Packers. So that obviously is something that I'm going to need to address in the story and in the promo, because that obviously is going to be something that they will use against us. We were the only team to beat you. We can do it again. The other significant thing, though, I think that immediately calls out to me is this one here, the hardcore matches. So the Silent Discotechnicos had one last season. It was called a Piñata Party, a match in which the ring was surrounded with various piñatas, all filled with lovely, painful objects and things to use to hurt your opponents with. So that was actually the match that the Discotechnicos won back the tag team championships in. So immediately there's, we've got prior experience in that, coupled with everything they went through when they were younger. This is home from home for them. On the other hand, the Heat Packers did not compete in any hardcore matches. So that immediately lends you to think, are they going to be able to make the step up to this? Are they going to be willing to go as far as Pablo and Vertigo are in order to get the win? So let us fire up a trusty Google Doc and let's start jotting some of these notes down just so I've got them to hand. I don't generally make a lot of notes, but like I said before, it'll be interesting to see how this works and how this contributes and maybe improves and enhances my own process in doing this, really. Okay, so here we've got a quick summary of the notes we've just gone over, the things that I think are going to be the key talking points and the key factors in what is going to hopefully bring the Silent Discotechnicos the victory here. So the Silent Discotechnicos had twice as many wins last season as the Heat Packers had matches. The Silent Discotechnicos have only lost once since making their debut, whereas the Heat Packers are very much 50-50. The Discotechnicos won the tag belts in a hardcore match, and obviously El Pablo has plenty of X Division history. Heat Packers haven't won any hardcore matches last year, and in fact they lost the belts to the Screaming Demons in a multi-team ladder match. So similarly chaotic, kind of no holds barred sort of affair. However, the Heat Packers did beat the Discotechnicos for the belts at the same time last year, but the Discotechnicos did beat the Heat Packers for the belts at the closing pay-per-view the year before that. So again, very much tied into the 50-50 kind of idea. And then the overriding idea that I think I want for this piece is the idea of walking a mile in our shoes. So playing off of that mile of broken glass thing, but then equally playing into the hardships that Pablo and Vertigo have had to endure to get to this point, and how that is going to have them in good stead for this competition here. So the next thing I want to do is I want to think about where this is going to take place. What's the location? I don't want it to be, we're just sparring in a gym somewhere, or we're at the stadium where this is taking place. I always like to find something a bit more creative in the local area, somewhere that plays to either the stipulation or the match, or even just leads into something against the opponents or something to do with the opponents. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go to good old Google Maps and head over to Los Angeles, and I'll kind of just have a bit of a scout around to see if there's anything that immediately jumps out as being something we can link to this match. Anything that's got a name that sounds relevant, or even just anything that's a bit funny, I usually quite like going for. But as we scan around, there's nothing really that is jumping out. There is a place called Rainbow. What is Rainbow? A census designated place in northern San Diego County, California. How far is Rainbow from Los Angeles? It's an hour and a half away. That's nothing in America. I don't know if there's anything there. Toasted Oak Vineyards and Winery. I've got this running bit where Pablo, he somehow manages to get a signature Rainbowlution branded drink into various places. There's Skittlebrow beer, there's Skittlecino coffee. What's Rainbow Camp? A fire station, obviously. Why would it not be? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to set it in Rainbow, but it's whether it's between Toasted Oak Vineyards and Rainbow Camp. I'm just wondering how I could spin a fire station. Maybe, okay, we open with Pablo and his family being chased out of the fire station because Pablo tried to coat the fire hoses in broken glass as a test of his endurance. That might be an idea. Let's jot that down as a maybe. I seem to start an unnecessary amount of promos with Pablo either in prison or having just been bailed out of prison. But, you know, that's par for the course for being an impulsive attention seeker. So we've got our notes, we've got our premise, we've got a location. I'm going to plug in, get stuck in, and we'll see how it plays out. Hey, so it's now the next day, and if I'm being completely transparent, I didn't actually really end up writing much more last night. I think it was a combination of this being the first bit of writing that I've had to do since mid-December last year, so it takes a while for the gears to start turning, you know. I'm also a very linear writer, so I have to start with the start and kind of go on and just sort of see where the words take me. And I think I was having trouble although I had the concept and notes kind of sprinkled throughout, I was struggling to find the kick to get it all going. So bit of a false start on that one, but over the course of today I've had a bit more time to think about things and to let that idea kind of marinate a bit more in my mind. So this time for realsies, let's get to writing. Okay, I think we're about there. Ended up being at around 785 words, I think I finished at, so I'm going to need a little bit of refining and editing down, but to be honest, with such a small word limit, I'm not mad at that. However, I think I will leave that for another day and I will end the vlog here. If you're still watching to this point, let me know what you thought down in the comments below. I'll leave a link to the story in the description if you want to go and read it for yourself. I'm obviously still very much trying to think of the best way to do this, whether we keep doing kind of the edited down live stream kind of vibe or just something that's a bit more checking in and summarizing at the start or at the end of a day. But yeah, it's great to have you all on board. Next time we see each other, we will react to the show results when they're posted. We will see how this story fared, see how El Pablo fared, and see whether we have taken that first step towards becoming the undisputed Extreme Wrestling Corporation champion. Please do like, share, subscribe. As I say, leave a comment down below, let me know what you think, and I will see you next time on Fighting Through Writing.